Hey, this is Jesse with Collins Properties here in Santa Cruz, and today is video number 2 in our series all about 1031 tax exchanges. And today we are going over the top 10 rules for 1031 exchanges. Rule number 1 are your deadline and general rules. So if you are relinquishing one or more properties, it is the date your last relinquished property closes. That is when the 45-minute period starts where you identify your replacement properties. Now, your replacement properties do not have to be in contract during that 45-day window. They just have to be identified. Also, keep in mind, you do not have to buy those properties you identified, but failure to follow any of those rules would disqualify your 1031 exchange. Rule number 2 is your 3-property rule. Now, this rule limits the number of acquisition properties you can buy to replace the relinquished property, and that is typically capped at 3. You do not have to buy all 3. You can buy any combination of. Just keep in mind, whether it's 1 or 3, that they have to be equal to or greater in value of your relinquished property. Rule number 3 is your 200% rule. Now, this rule takes effect if you want to buy more than 3 properties. And this rule basically means that if you're buying 4 or more properties, their combined fair market value cannot exceed 200% of the value of the relinquished property that you just sold. Rule number 4, and this is rarely used, is the 95% rule. This only comes into play if investors want to buy more than 3 replacement properties and they want the combined value of those properties to exceed 200% of the value of their relinquished property. Then they have to buy at least 95% of the value of the properties that they identified. So basically, you have to buy all of the properties you identified. This is rarely used because it's kind of hard to pull off, but if you want to buy more than 3 properties and you want the value of those properties to be over 200% of the value of the home or the property that you relinquished, this rule is for you. Rule number 5 is the property acquired in the 45-day window rule. Now, this might seem a little complex. I'm going to try to simplify it for you. Basically, what it means is that if you actually buy a property in that 45-day period, it also counts as a property being identified. So you could buy a property all cash in that period of time, decide you want to buy 1 or more others. As long as you identify those as well in that period of time, the property that you bought counts as one identified. Rule number 6 is the manner of identification rule. Now, the properties need to be identified in writing by the taxpayer in an unambiguous description, either the tax information or the property address. If it's a condo, the unit number must be identified, and if the taxpayer is buying less than 100% share interest in the property, that needs to be described as well. Rule number 7 pertains to who must receive your property identification notice. Now, this would be going to your qualified intermediary, which would either be a title company or an escrow officer that is running this 1031 exchange for you. Rule number 8 states that the replacement property must be the same as the one identified. Now, the IRS gives us a few examples of what this actually means, and they use the term substantially the same. Now, in the first example, the taxpayer identifies a 2-acre parcel of land and he ends up purchasing 1.5 of those acres. The IRS considers that substantially the same because it is 75% of the value of the original identified property. Now, the second example they give is a taxpayer identifies a barn on 2 acres of land and he only purchases the barn and the land underneath the barn. Well, the IRS does not consider that substantially the same because there's quite a bit difference in value of the barn without those 2 acres from the identified property. So that is the rule of replacement property needs to be the same as the identified property. Rule number 9 is the property to be constructed rule. So you are allowed to buy a property that is under construction, but you have to provide the legal description, the address, and a detailed description of what is going to be constructed on that property. Rule number 10 is the reverse exchange identification rule. Now, in a reverse exchange, the taxpayer buys the replacement properties before he sells his relinquished property, in which case he must provide a written description of what he intends to sell no later than 45 days after he closes on the replacement properties. Thanks for watching the video today. I hope you learned something about 1031 exchanges. If you found value in the video, please show the like button some love and subscribe to stay up to date with more Santa Cruz real estate information. This is Jesse Collins with Collins Properties, and until next time, stay awesome.